We are reconnecting today with Professor Satish Jayram, my professor and my principal back from college. Professor is known for his visionary ideas in education and leadership, and it's been 5 years since I entered the professional world, and I'm excited to explore how innovative his approach is and how he inspires till date and shapes the future of the young leaders and the coming generation. Professor, it's an honor to have you here. Welcome to Flip the Script.
Thank you, Nandan, and thank you, Ramya. It's such a pleasure to be of use to the next generation.
We couldn't be more happier to have like someone who's actually taught us and sort of molded us through the entire path. We'd love if you could start off by like sort of walking us through the journey and how you became the principal of a hotel school.
So, to be honest, I never planned to become the principal of a hotel school. It's just something that organically came upon me. It was 1996, and married for about a year. And then the pressures of balancing operations and family started to tell on me. And I had a friend who said, "You would do very well in education." And a lot of people at work also said to me that, we love your training classes and it's very good. Why don't you give it a shot? So my son was actually just a couple of days old when I visited the institute for the first time. It was in August 1996, and I delivered a kind of sample class for the final year, and they loved it. So that's how it all started. But having said that, I'd been in operations for a little more than 7 years, and I'd started to feel that sense of intellectual depravity. And I saw that the entropy of operations is something which doesn't really allow you to step back and make things better. It's just that this whole wave is so powerful, and you have so many more people who keep doing the same thing over and over again. It actually inspired me to write a 3 series column a couple of months back when I was doing this certification program with Cornell to get certified as a new age CHRO. So I wrote this 3-part series called Ad Minutiae, which is combining, the administrative tangles and the minutiae of operations and how it actually derails organizations from achieving what they want to achieve. So I'd actually started to feel that, and I think there was something I was seeking for myself. And then I reflected on this with my wife and with my friends, and they said, "Yeah, sure, why not switch over to a career in education?" And it was a call for me to take because I think I was potentially letting go of the ladder, so to say, because we were already halfway up the ladder by then. And it meant starting all over again. But I thought there would be a lot more meaning for myself. And then there are the prescriptions, right? I mean, you have the eligibility criteria, and you should have spent at least 7 years in operations, and you should have had at least a master's degree and so on. Things were not as complex in those days. And the school was actually an extension of operations, which is what made the school unique to begin with. So as an operations manager, I found it very easy to fit into a school which was able to deliver knowledge on the operations side. So it was great. But having said that, I think I had to work hard on developing the talents for facilitation. I was always very excited, and I drew a lot of energy from the classroom, and I delivered with passion. So I was able to bring what I had to the table. And the only goal I had at the end of every class is whether I've given it my all. And then, growth started to happen in an organic way. Okay. Started to feel a lot more professionally fulfilled. My family was growing, it was meeting my family needs, and I was able to find myself. And in that process, somehow, the journey began. And that's how it happened. But it was not a switch on, switch off. There's no formula. It just happened.
That's very interesting actually, and it must have been such a difficult decision at that point in time to actually make that move and like go ahead. But just for the audience, I would like you to like clarify what you mean by like operations, like hospitality operations. In one sentence, can you just describe what operations is to someone who doesn't understand hotels as much as we do?
So I would say operations is what brings the revenue in. So whether it is from selling rooms, selling experiences, selling food and beverage, curating experiences, designing opportunities for people to find value in the service that you deliver. That's what operations is.
That's great. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. So yeah. So I think
So you have rightly described the most pivotal moment in your life was coming to the hotel school and being the principal. So you must have experienced many more moments in your life similar to that. So, can you put up some brief on, the most important pivotal moments of your life which shaped your journey and going ahead?
Uh, you're overflowing with energy, right? When you come from operations, because you've been there, done that. It's like getting something which is fresh off the oven. So when I came back, I had so many things to say, and the principal then was very excited to get me to teach everything that they could get me to teach. So I taught from front office operations at early stages. I taught sales and marketing in the final year. I was one of the first people to start teaching revenue management in the country, and I ultimately landed up doing my PhD in that. I used to teach business communication, and then there was a lot of excitement about management information systems, analysis, data, how does it affect operations. So all of that was like a big high for me. I would go into the classroom, and students used to be agog about, this is how it actually works. So that gave me a lot of fulfillment. Students loved the experiences that I shared because I wasn't teaching from a book, right? And then the gaps between academia and what happens in the real world, they started to get reduced. And because we had this ancillary hotel attached to the institute, people who took my class started to find operations a lot more exciting. And that is exactly how the founding fathers of the institution, as well as the ancillary hotel, had envisioned it. So the way it was meant to work was to actually bring people from operations so that they add value. And that's exactly what I did. So I don't think I did anything special. But having said that, I think excellence for me was a huge priority. I didn't want to teach from a dead text. I wanted to control what happened in the classroom in terms of being very accurate with reality, making people absolutely good to go in terms of their ability to deliver on the ground. And so I took responsibility for that. Tried to bridge the gap between what happens in the academic world and the real world. Started to integrate, the operations into the classroom into operations. Started to add value to the overall ecosystem, and that started the growth journey. I started teaching in 1996. I must have virtually taught everything under the sun, as I imagine. And sometime about 2003 is when they said they wanted me to lead academics as vice principal. So then the leadership journey began, because until then, you're just a module leader who's teaching the class. But then when you become vice principal, you get a lot of administrative responsibility. You start to lead other people. I was an HOD before that. It's exciting. You have to demonstrate to people how what you do is different, and then it becomes a benchmark. And really speaking, I think this leadership doesn't come to you because of a position, right? It comes to you because your stakeholders feel a lot more addressed. Your students enjoy this. Your students want to be led by you. They come back and they demand a lot more from you, right? And there's no greater joy than giving. So, well, all of this led me to become principal. I started acting principal in December 2005, and the board actually confirmed my principalship in 2006. And the interesting part is that I am the only person who served 3 tenures as principal. So my first tenure was 2006-11. The second one was 11-16. The third one was 16-21. And interestingly, there was a rule that got formulated sometime about 2010, which said you can't be a principal for more than 2 tenures. So then my tenure starting 2011 got counted as the first tenure, and my tenure starting 2016 got counted as the second tenure, and I finished in 2021. And I think it was good time because I believe I had done what I could have done. And the pandemic actually changed everything for everyone. And I was happy to get into research development and take on a new project.
No, that's really great to hear. And I think two great takeaways from everything that you said was the pursuit of excellence, which is something that like got you through and like actually made you better every single day. And the other one is that like the important thing in leadership is not just positional. It was like other people already looking at you as a leader, which helped you sort of get to that position. And I think our audience would love, that's definitely two takeaways that our audiences would love to see. So my next question is like, why did you choose like this unconventional path? Like education is very important, but it's not something everybody would like look at. So why this?
My question is, why not? So you have the responsibility of leading from the front. You have the opportunity to become a role model. You have the ability to influence people's minds. And I saw this really as a gap. When I was in operations, I could sense that organizations have their priorities, they have their standards, they have their ability to foster growth for talent only up to a certain extent. A lot of new knowledge exists out there in the universe, and somebody has to become a medium of that new knowledge. And if you have to bring about that change, you have to do it firsthand. So you need to have exemplars and prototypes, and you can go back to institutions, branded institutions, and say that these were the benchmarks. But unless you do this yourself, you don't really have the right to say that you have incubated or brought about change. So that's one of my biggest motivations. I wanted to do something without constantly worrying about what did not exist, because you could create what you wanted, and there had to be one POC, there had to be one minimum viable product that you created. And I had the courage in those years. I was about 28 years old then when I first moved into academics, and I said, I'm going to make a difference. And I guess that fire really got me to start working on many of the redundancies that I saw around me. So I saw people who didn't know what they were actually speaking about. I met people without depth. I looked at the general attitude towards hospitality as a career. I looked at people working extremely hard, and they were a bit like rats on wheels in a circus, working extremely hard, pedaling away furiously, and not really coming upon anything at the end of it. So you came back another day and you started pedaling furiously again. And there had to be a smarter way of breaking this impasse, right? I mean, you can't exist in status quo all the time. And when we started to deliver this new education, the premium for the graduates became very obvious straight away. And that was my cue that we were obviously doing something right. So you have to walk the talk, right? The only option that you have is to create impact and to show the world that this is how it's done, right? Because there's been history, but along with history, you also get baggage. Okay, and that's the baggage that I didn't want to affect the next generation. And I had very lofty ideals at that point of time about how this new generation is going to shape, and I felt a great sense of responsibility about not derailing another generation of people and stopping them from achieving their potential. So the responsibility is really yours, right? You've got to do what is required. So The change has to happen at every level, okay, at the individual level, okay, at the organizational level, at the societal level. And when you do all of this, it allows you to grow yourself. I found myself getting upskilled. I started to learn a lot more. I completed degrees, started getting involved in research, and I started to learn new techniques in facilitation. All of this was very rewarding. And because it had huge impact, I knew what I was doing was right. So I started to experience the change. Otherwise I would have gotten out of it as quickly as I had gotten into it. So I started to experience change and I started to value the personal growth it was giving me. It was making me a better person than I was. A highly excited operations professional getting into education and then finding that what you have to do is a lot more than that. So you accepted responsibility, not only at personality level, okay, as a family man, you started to accept responsibility to change the world, change your world, and you've got to deliver that. People look up to you. And then I started to take this so seriously that the lines of profession and family and passion, all of them got blurred. And, you know, well, it led me to where I wanted to take entire generations. And I think in a small way, I succeeded with that.
Interesting. So, I mean, you have had a career spanning to roughly around 40 years now, and me and Ramya, we just starting our journey in terms of a professional life. So I would really want to understand, where do you get this energy from? What drives you every day in pursuing excellence and giving all your efforts, putting all your efforts in, getting the best result out of your.
I'm 57 now. Um, I wake up every morning with a fire in my belly. Okay, I still have the passion. I want to change the world. And Eric Clapton has something to do with that. But I will change the world as long as I can. So you have to have this faith that you have the ability to do it. And it doesn't matter what's happening around you, right? You have to keep your head on your shoulders and think straight. You start to believe in everything that you actually wanted, because it's not going to be put into your lap by somebody else, right? If you want a different world, you've got to start building that different world for yourself and for all the people that matter to you. And if you have the ability to make a difference and you don't do it, you carry the guilt of not having tried. So that's one thing. I'm never going to be left waiting to take the initiative. I will take the initiative. And I think each one of us is an extraordinary creation. And we've never really fully leveraged what we can do. And unless you try and unless you start to see yourself in a different light every day, because there's so much change around you, and you have the ability to respond to that change because you're so unique. And if many unique people start to leverage their ability to make a better world, can you see what we can do? Then we're not going to be sitting back and worrying about what doesn't exist. We're going to be talking about what will happen, because all of us are going to be pitching at that wheel and making it turn. That's what really matters. And sure, I know I've slowed down quite a bit, as I grow older, but I've got miles to go and I'm not going to stop. And this is a process of change. You're part of the process. You've got to keep going because you've not really become the best version of yourself. There's so much more growth for us to achieve. And it's never a destination, right? It's a journey. You've got to keep committing to become better and take the responsibility to make a change, make a difference, get on with it. I think it's a duty that each one of us have to ourselves and to the people that we impact.
I think that's definitely very, very like that energizes us. I think what drives you and your passion is definitely something that's energizing us. So I mean, right now we're at a spot time in our lives where like we need to make so many decisions, and Like it's so hard to make decisions both professionally and personally. What advice would you have for this particular matter? How did you go about making your decisions?
So I think it's important for us to first accept that decision making is a specialized process. You have to demystify it in your head first, right? So we sometimes take a lot of knee-jerk decisions. Sometimes we make intuitive decisions, gut feel decisions. But I think decision making as a skill is a structured process. It needs you to prepare to take good decisions. It is complex, it's engaging, it allows you to absorb all of the inputs that you need from around you. Sometimes these inputs come from data, sometimes these inputs come from feedback, sometimes it comes from the environment, it comes from your ability to analyze what's happening around you, it comes from your ability to reorder all the bits and pieces of information that you have so you can strategize better. But at all times, I think it's a heady mix between what could be factual, logical, and what could be intuitive, comes from your gut. And there's no formula again. I've had a lots of hits and misses. You don't get all the decisions right all the time. I don't know how much I've succeeded, but I would say a fair deal, because you have to constantly keep balancing the rational and the emotional. And sometimes you'll end up using the wrong approach in the wrong situation. And that's something that you learn over time, right? And then you have to think about the implications of your decisions. Before you actually take that final call, you've got to think about the implications of people, how they're going to be affected, how it's going to change their lives. And it sometimes helps to bounce things off, listen to them and say, so how does this change your life? What does it mean for you? And I think it's necessary to prioritize what might be important for other people, right? And as a leader, I've had to take a lot of key I thought were important and put them on the back burner because they did not represent the larger common good that would affect people. But in the end, I think these decisions create a sense of harmony and they allow you to carry your people with you. And that is what really makes a difference. So, professionally, I would say a lot of our decision making is peppered by our ability to be rational, right? But I think, given the degree of complexity that we have today, sometimes you have to listen to your inner voice. Sometimes you have to allow your values to guide you. Sometimes you have to allow your own key personality and what you stand for to drive decisions. They are likely to make you unpopular, but then you will then value a lot more what you stand for rather than doing what is going to get the claps. So uh, I think it's a combination: instinct, drive, passion, logic, data, sense, connectivity with the environment. Okay, your own drive for results. Decisions actually bring results. So depending on what kind of results you want in what time, you've got to make those calls very often. And I've always done what made the greatest sense to me. And sometimes it made me, but I started to leverage the creative change that it brings along. So you learn to enjoy that whole decision making process. But you have to teach yourself how to make good decisions, right? So, to answer your question, there's no formula here. Okay, it's something that each one of you are going to have to evolve by yourself. And you've got to choose the critical success factors by which you're going to be guided. You're going to make decisions that are good for your stakeholders, for yourself, and for everybody at large. So that's a call that you have to take. And I must also tell you that you're not going to get it right all the time. I never did.
Yeah, that I think that's something Nandan and I also have discussed so much. Like the thing about decision making, it's it's such a personal thing, but it's also so complex and there's so much to it. But thank you so much for everything that you've told us. I think the next thing we want to like focus on is innovation, and it's something everybody's talking about today as well. But we really want to know how you sort of foster that culture of like innovation in your organization, as well as how do you sort of like balance it out with like from a P&L perspective, because innovation takes a lot of like sometimes money and it's not always like appreciated and like things. So how do you balance all of that out while like not stifling creativity?
I led an organization for 15 years, and I think it's very important to get it right in the mind first. If you are open, you can innovate. If you have a vision, if you can create a rich picture of what's going to come out of that innovation, you will foster it. But you can't get carried away, and you need to have the ability to balance this whole initiative with some calculated risks. Having said that, I think we just spoke about decision making. If decisions don't solve problems, and if you don't solve problems creatively, then you're not innovating. So very often you might be in a very comfortable position and you have to quickly change, pivot, adapt, and see if the responses that you're getting are allowing you to continue in the direction you want to take. I think that's something that can happen only if you have openness as the prime criteria. All innovation comes from your ability to be open about impact. So openness in terms of acceptance and openness in terms of impact. Unless you're really creating social impact, whatever innovation you might in, it's going to be a temporary phase. And in the process, you've got to leverage your teams. Right? There's so much positivity in your team. You have the choice to focus on what people don't have, or you have the choice to focus on what people have. So you are always going to be in a position where you don't have the resources. So I chose to listen to people about, look, here we are, this is what we do, this is what we have. Where do we go from here? What's the best thing we can do under these circumstances? It's a bit like being marooned on an island, right? And you just have what you have. You've got to take it forward. So you can be very decisive. You can take good decisions. You can come up with solutions. You can beat down solutions which are not going to work and which are going to just consume resources. Uh, but you've got to focus on all of those variables that are affecting the situation you're in. And then you have to say, are things getting better? Are we really innovating for impact? Are we making sense, or are we just getting carried away? So that's the balance that you need to make. And I think all innovation for me is really from necessity. Right? We were always strapped for resources. We never had everything as perfectly as it was supposed to be. So necessity drove us to innovate. And I think in hindsight, we did a jolly good job out of it. So we were improvising all the time. Okay, we were adapting to everything was getting thrown at us. We worked with an international partner, so a lot of pressures came in from there. We had to change our mindset. We had to look at things differently. We had to deal with people who were inept, and you had to bring them up to speed. And the only way you can do that is by walking the talk. You've got to go out there and show them how it's done, right? And innovation is actually something that you follow as a principle, right? So I see all of these as three sides of a triangle, right? So there's creativity, there's innovation, and there's change. And then there's the review on whether your creativity is actually driving you correctly to innovate right, and whether it's giving you the desired change, and then you change, and the cycle continues. So I think that's what this whole cycle of innovation is all about. More than anything else, as an innovator, you have to lead the process of innovation with passion. People have got to see you as being the champion of that change. So you've got to show people how it's done, right? You've got to stand there and deliver and inspire them to want them to deliver. And it's not necessary for people to become clones of you. Sometimes people fail. And as a good leader, you have to absorb the risk of their failure, right? You've got to encourage people to keep going on, because otherwise you will never foster the culture of innovation. And on the other side, look, costs are a reality. Burn is a reality. You need money to be able to do the things that you have to do because you have to innovate, right? So business is business. Whether it is for profit or not for profit, business is business. So costs are costs. Resources are resources. There's always going to be a paucity of them. And there are realities that you have to contend with. So irrespective of what context you might be in, nothing speaks as well as an operating surplus. It gives you a lot of flexibility. It gives you a lot of bigger room for you to want to do what you want to do. So you have to balance that out. So while on the one hand you have the leadership and the culture and the behavior and the passion driving it, on the other hand, you also have to be extremely rational about what you're doing, right? So what I did was that I took a long, hard look at the situation that we were in, and we reorganized, we restructured, okay, we re-engineered things, we started to make things a lot more efficient, we made them effective where it really mattered, okay? So creating systems that work for you rather than the other way around, right? So if you're part of an unthinking, inoperable system, and if you're pandering to the whims and fancies of the system and not really creating impact, there's something wrong about the way you're innovating. And then system efficiency kicks in. The system's got to deliver the goods, and it's got to do it in a smarter way. If you are not doing anything from what you learned the last year, there's something wrong with the way you're innovating then. So it's not necessarily transformational all of a sudden. So, you know, it's sometimes small increments. And you might have people asking you whether it's delivered the goods in terms of is it giving you a healthier top line? Is it giving you a fatter bottom line? Right. So the answer to that really is that you can achieve a lot by optimizing your resources and optimizing costs. But I come from a view where revenue enhancement comes from adding value. You create a great product, you deliver a fantastic service, you create an outstanding student experience, you create a great environment, okay, where people feel cared for, where they feel that they can be heard. They actually push forward new culture, and that culture actually gives you the brand that you have. And that brand then becomes popular. People tend to see how it's making a difference. And all of this has to ultimately translate, right? I mean, you still have to sign your balance sheet at the end of the financial year, right? So you have to constantly keep listening to your audiences, look at what kind of solutions they want. You've got to redeploy resources, you've got to reprioritize, you've got to keep juggling all the time. And the interesting part is that you're juggling many glass globes as a leader, and you're constantly under pressure on which one's going to really crash and which one's not going to crash with each other because you have so many stakeholders. But it's been interesting.
So we have discussed some really important, really informative points until now. And, as we come to the end of the very interesting session with you, I would like you to highlight on two very important things. One would be, what specific advice would you like to give all the young professionals who are hesitant to make bold moves in their life? And, achieve what they want to achieve. And I would also like you to throw a light on, what's next in your story. Is it going to be more flipping the script? When do you plan to stop? Because it doesn't look like you're going to stop. So I would really want you to throw some light on these two very important aspects.
Okay, so the two things that you're asking me, so let me try and focus on what's important for you. What do you really mean by bold, right? So bold has to be seen in a certain context. So for me, that context is bold is to do what is right. Okay, for me, that's what bold meant, to do what is right for yourself, for your family, for people around you, for the world, for society. So if doing right means that you have to constantly keep challenging yourself, innovating, bringing your creative energies to the table, and diligently applying yourself. So it's true that it's 99% perspiration and only 1% inspiration. So you're keeping at it because you have this really rich vision about how things are going to turn out in the future, right? So you have to examine what you do every day of your life tactically from a strategic perspective as well. So you've got to flip the lens once in a while, not just the script. And you've got to constantly keep realigning your sails. Okay, because another beautiful lesson I learned from the scorpions when I was growing up, it's the winds of change. And if you don't align to the winds of change and if you don't change your sails, then you've not really done what you need to do as a bold leader. So you got to keep learning, you keep growing, you constantly keep changing. Sometimes you fall and you graze your knees and you scuff your elbows and you know what you're good at. You sometimes recognize your strengths, you recognize your limitations, your failures. And it's important to be bold by standing up again, right? So in preparing for the future, you have to invest in yourself. So you have to develop yourself. And you are never ever going to be the best version, right? There is no best which cannot be better. So you got to keep at that. So if you're bold enough to adopt this attitude, and if you're committed to making change an important part of your life, it works. So, like I said, keep an open mind. The only way for you to look at new solutions is to accept that everything that you know is probably not the last knowledge. So there could be hybrids, okay? There could be new combinations. There could be new mixed bags that you never thought. Okay, and you got to review the implications of what being bold means for you, for all the people that you affect. That's the first part. And I've been flipping my script all the time. So I'm challenging myself all the time. And it's true. People talk about things like VUCA, tuna, rupt, and Barney, and so on. And there's so much about that. But my first flip in the script was, instead of taking the operations route after 7 years, I flipped it to become an academic, right? So once I became an academic from a faculty sense of the term, I got into leadership. So that was flipping the script again. And then when I finished my tenure after 25 years in education, I came on to something very exciting. So I started to build tech hybrid solutions, which I know are going to be required as this country goes forward to create impact. If you look at the deficit that we have in terms of the talent that we need to run services in this country, and I say hospitality, tourism, retail, aviation, realty. So virtually every sector is going to need people with a service mindset. And the only way you can achieve that is to first deliver that underpinning knowledge in an open format and allow people to engage with real life learning opportunities. Now, that is an uncomfortable position to be in because it means first aligning the dots, connecting the dots, and then making sure that people want to walk on the line that you've created. So it's a big, tall order. But having said that, I think it's important to step back once in a while. Okay, if you really want to flip your script, you can't do it while you're still in the script. So you got to step back from the script. And then you take time off, you reflect, you build incrementally. I think my technology skills can go through a sea change. I've not learned everything that I have to learn in technology. So I know that I have to get a lot more skilled, right? And you've got to prepare for a future life transformation, which is very different from the way life is today. And I can see this around me when I look at my family, when I look at my son and my daughter, when I look at you people as students, and when I look at you are so comfortable with technology. Okay, I can conceive technological solutions, but it's people like you who are going to implement it. And I have to prepare for you more than anyone else, right? If I have to still continue to be relevant, and if you want to continue to receive guidance from me, I think my first responsibility is to keep myself relevant to you. So being who I am, okay, I think it allows me to uh, love being the disruptor, the innovator, the ideator, the incubator. So I mean, it's great, and I think that's what keeps me going. But having said that, I think you still have to pay the bills, right? I mean, there's a reality that all of us contend with, right? So uh, if you love what you do, then it's not a job anymore. But then you've got to also understand that survival is a reality, and you've got to just protect yourself from not allowing your work to become a drudgery, right? And the minute that happens, there's some lack of alignment between what you're doing and what you really need to do boldly in terms of doing what is right. So flip your own script, right? Nobody's going to flip it for you. Okay, somebody is going to probably give you feedback on your script and say, hey, you know what, your script can look better. But I think it's up to you for you to look at your script every day, keep revisiting it. Okay, be critical of yourself before the world becomes critical of you. And you got to keep recharging your script, right? I mean, you learn so many new things every day. Okay, there are so many new plots that are unfolding, and there are so many new narratives that are getting built, and it's up to you for you to find a better work-life balance.
That is so true. I mean, I feel like I was back in the classroom after 5 years, and I've recharged myself. I've revisited to all those learnings I had back in college. And I think, Ramya, both of us are going to retire the same day Professor retires, or fondly
For
called
sure.
as Professor Jerry retires. So
For
it was
sure.
amazing to have you here. I mean, it was a wonderful session, and I hope the audience would take back a lot of insights and apply them in their life to make it much easier. And the hustle goes on to be excellent in what we do. So it's the pursuit of excellence, and which leads to the pursuit of happiness, I suppose.
Thank you so much for being here.
I'm delighted that I could spend time with both of you. I hope what I say makes sense to coming generations. And more than anything else, I'd like to add a disclaimer. These are my personal views. It is not necessary that what applied to my life must apply to yours. So therefore, purely treat me as a case study. And if you learn from it, there'll be nobody happier than me. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
sir.